Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, unless you're driving, obviously.
Yeah, right.
But picture this. You're standing on the edge of a mountain in the Philippines, and what you're looking at is just impossibly green. It's layer upon layer of carved steps, just rising into the clouds. The rice terraces.
It is one of the most stunning landscapes on Earth. And, it's also the perfect image to anchor what we're talking about today.
It really is, because when you look at those terraces, your first thought is probably, wow, nature is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look closer and you realize this isn't wild nature. This is engineered. It's cultivated.
It's this massive, complex hydraulic system where water has to flow from the very top through every single layer all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah, and if one wall breaks or if one farmer up top hoards the water, the whole ecosystem below it just dries up.
That's the metaphor. And today we are doing a deep dive into a manifesto that argues the Philippine Church, which is, it's massive, is acting a lot like a terrace that's hoarding the water.
The book is called Beyond Borders, a strategic roadmap to raise missionaries for the unreached. And look, I know what you're thinking.
I'm not a missionary. I don't live in Manila. Why does this matter to me?
Exactly. But trust me on this. This is a case study on something we all deal with. The trap of comfort.
It really is. The source material presents this fascinating paradox. On paper, the Philippine Church is a huge success story. It's vibrant, it's resilient, the queues are packed, the music is loud.
All the signs of health.
Right. But the author argues that you can have all of that, the success, the numbers, the activity, and still completely miss the entire point of your existence.
That is a bold claim. Usually if a church is packed and people are happy, we call that a win. We call that revival.
And that's exactly where the critique starts. The book calls this condition inward-focused. It suggests that all that energy is just cycling back into the community itself rather than flowing outward.
It's asking a hard question then.
A really hard question. Is this growth or is it just swelling?
Oof. Okay, so let's get into the diagnosis then. Because the author uses a phrase that I think is going to step on some toes. Comfort-shaped faith.
It's a stinging diagnosis. The book argues that our traditional metrics, how big is the building, how slick are the programs, how safe does the community feel, have created a form of Christianity that is allergic to risk.
There's a line in chapter 3 that really jumped out at me. It says, safety and social stability, domesticate discipleship. Domesticate, like we've taken a wolf and turned it into a house cat.
That's the implication. When you prioritize safety and stability above all else, you lose the wildness of the mission. The text draws this really sharp distinction between local faithfulness and global alignment.
Okay, break that down.
You can be incredibly faithful, locally volunteering, giving to charity, being a good neighbor, but still be completely disconnected from the global need.
But isn't local faithfulness enough? Bloom where you're planted, right? That's what we hear all the time.
And that's the common pushback. But the book argues that blooming where you're planted becomes an excuse for ignoring the places where nothing is planted. And this brings us to the concept of the unreached.
Right.
And we need to be very clear about how the author defines this in chapter 2.
Yeah, let's clarify that.
Yeah.
Because I think most people hear unreached and they think, oh, that's my neighbor Bob who hates religion.
No, Bob is what you'd call reached, but unresponsive. He has access. He can turn on the radio. He can walk into a church. He can Google the Bible.
So it's about access.
Exactly. The unreached, by the book's definition, are people who have zero access. No church, no Bible in their language, no Christian neighbors. It's a geography and access issue, not a rejection issue.
So the argument is, if you have a massive, resource-rich church in the Philippines,
Or anywhere else, really.
or anywhere else, and you're ignoring the parts of the world with zero access, you're just circulating the water on the top terrace.
That's the theological error the book points out. It's not just a strategy gap, it's a failure of purpose. But this is where the deep dive gets really interesting. The Philippines isn't just any nation. The book argues they are sitting on a goldmine of strategic assets.
Assets that make them uniquely qualified to solve this problem.
Yes.
This is the Filipino advantage in Chapter 4. And some of these are obvious, like English fluency.
Sure, English is the global trade language. That opens doors. But the more profound asset is what they call the diaspora.
The OFWs.
Yeah.
The overseas Filipino workers.
Right. And think about the strategy here. For a Western missionary to get into a closed country in the Middle East or parts of Asia, it's a nightmare. Visas are denied, scrutiny is high.
Hmm.
But there are millions of Filipinos already living in those countries.
They're engineers, they're nannies, they're teachers, construction workers.
They're already inside the borders. They have access that a professional missionary could never dream of. The book argues that this isn't some accident of economics, it's a providential setup. The workforce is already deployed.
They just haven't been activated for the mission yet.
Exactly.
But there's another asset mentioned that's a bit darker, or maybe heavier is the right word. Resilience.
This is crucial. The text highlights that Filipinos have a history of enduring colonial trauma, political instability, poverty, natural disasters. Now, we usually look at those things as negatives. We want to fix them.
Right. We want stability. We want comfort.
Of course. But the book just flips the script on that. It says that because of this history, Filipinos are uniquely suited for suffering. And suffering is a non-negotiable requirement for missions.
That's totally counterintuitive. We usually try to recruit people by telling them how great the experience will be. Come on, this amazing adventure.
And that's why so many Western missionaries pack up and go home when the power goes out or the political situation gets dicey. They just aren't used to it.
Right.
The book argues that a Filipino missionary can land in a really hard place and say, I've seen worse than this. I can function here. Their pain has prepared them for their purpose.
So you have the access, the language, and the grit. It sounds like the perfect recipe. So why isn't it happening at scale? Why isn't the Philippines the #1 sending nation in the world?
Because there is one massive barrier standing in the way. And it's not money. It's not politics. It's the very thing that holds Filipino culture together. Family.
I read chapter 14, and honestly, I felt the weight of it. In the U.S., we're so individualistic. If I decide I want to move to Nepal, my mom might be sad, but she'd probably say, follow your dreams.
It's very different in this context. The book describes a culture of profound family loyalty. Children are often seen as the retirement plan for the parents.
The social safety net.
Exactly. There's this deep, unspoken contract. We raised you, we sacrificed for you, now you get a stable job and you take care of us.
So if you say, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to move to a war-torn country to be a missionary and I won't be making any money, that's not just a career change.
It feels like a betrayal. It's viewed as abandoning your duty. The book talks about parental fear. You have parents who are pillars of the church, very religious, but who will actively block their children from missions.
They want their kids to serve God, sure.
But as a doctor or a lawyer, ideally within a 10-mile radius.
They want them to be good, but they really, really want them to be safe.
And solvent. So the book has to tackle this head on. You can't just tell people to ignore your family. That doesn't work in this culture.
So what's the workaround? How do you get past that?
It's all about reframing. The book proposes shifting the narrative from loss to communal obedience. The idea is that the family isn't losing a child, the family is sending the child. The sacrifice becomes shared.
So the parents become part of the mission team, in a sense.
Exactly. It challenges the parents to see their child's departure not as a betrayal of the family, but as the family's ultimate gift to the world. It raises the stakes. It asks the parents, is your faith real enough to trust God with your children's safety?
That is a massive ask. I mean, that is shifting a mindset that has been there for generations.
It is. And that's why the book says you can't just rely on inspiration. You need a strategy. You can't just wait for people to feel called. You have to build a system that produces them.
And this brings us to part 2 of the book. Formation before mobilization.
I see this issue all the time in different organizations. People get excited. Maybe they hear a sermon or, a deep dive like this.
Right.
And they want to mobilize immediately. Put me on a plane. But the book warns that mobilization without deep formation is just a recipe for disaster.
Because they burn out.
They burn out, or worse, they do damage. They get to the field and realize that enthusiasm doesn't help you navigate cross-cultural conflict or, deep loneliness.
That makes sense.
So the book argues we need to focus on who the person is long before we focus on where they are going.
And the timeline for this starts way earlier than I expected. Chapter 6 focuses on youth, on teenagers.
It has to. The author argues that if you wait until someone is 25, it's often too late. By then, the script for their life is already set. They have the corporate job, the student debt, the expectations. The golden handcuffs are on.
So you have to catch their imagination when they're 15 or 16.
You have to integrate the concept of calling into discipleship before they choose their college major. You have to present a life of mission as a viable, heroic option, not just a backup plan for people who couldn't get a corporate job.
But it's not just about inspiring teenagers. We're back to that ecosystem idea. A rice terrace isn't just one farmer. It's a whole village maintaining the walls.
This is the ecosystem approach in chapter 8 and 12. We tend to have this superhero view of missions, the Lone Ranger who goes out into the jungle.
Right.
But the book argues that informality limits scalability.
Okay, translate that for me. Informality limits scalability.
It means you can't build a movement on just ad hoc heroes.
Mhm.
If you want to send thousands of people, you need boring structural things. You need pipelines. You need internships. You need training centers. You need mental health support systems.
It's the infrastructure that makes the water flow.
Precisely. The text says structure is not opposed to the spirit. Structure is the plumbing. Without it, the water, all that zeal, all that passion just runs off the side of the mountain and is wasted.
So let's say the Philippine Church pulls this off. They build the pipeline, they convince the parents, they send the workers.
Yeah.
How do they keep it going? Because I feel like I've seen movements explode and then fade away just as fast.
That is the sustainability question. And Chapter 20 addresses this by redefining what success even looks like. We have to stop measuring visibility, how many people are at the conference, and start measuring reproduction.
Reproduction,
Right.
meaning are the missionaries making more missionaries?
And are the senders making more senders? One specific tactic the book suggests, and I think this is just brilliant, is the creation of alumni networks in Chapter 17.
Okay, explain how that works. Is it just a reunion for retired missionaries?
No, think of it more like a teaching hospital. In medicine, you have the veteran attendings teaching the residents. In the military, you have combat veterans training the new recruits.
Okay, I see.
The book argues that when a missionary returns from the field, they shouldn't just retire into obscurity.
Which happens a lot. They come back, nobody really understands what they went through, and they just sort of fade into the background.
Which is such a tragic waste of intellectual capital. The alumni network idea is to formally position these returnees as mentors. They are the ones who can tell the 20-year-old, here is how you handle the loneliness. Here is how you navigate the visa issues.
You create a loop.
You create a loop where the wisdom of the previous generation fuels the next one. That's how you get generational faithfulness. It stops being a one-off adventure and starts being a legacy.
That's powerful.
It is. But underneath all these systems, the alumni networks, the youth programs, all of it, there's one core value that has to change. And this is my favorite part of the book, Chapter 13, the theology of courage.
I loved this section. Because usually when we talk about courage, we think about being fearless. Like, I'm not scared of anything.
Which is nonsense. Everyone is scared. The book clarifies that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is trust in God rather than favorable outcomes.
Say that again. That is such a heavy distinction.
Courage is trust in God rather than favorable outcomes.
Wow.
Think about what that means. We live in a world, and frankly a church culture, that is obsessed with ROI. If I do X, I will get Y. If I go on this mission trip, I will be safe, I will be successful, and I will have a great story to tell.
And the book is saying, maybe not?
The book is saying you go because you are called, regardless of the why. You might get sick, you might be rejected, you might not see a single convert for 10 years. Courage is going anyway because the obedience is the success, not the outcome.
That is wildly countercultural. It essentially says the guarantee isn't safety, the guarantee is presence. God is with you.
And that's the vision painted in Chapter 16. It envisions a future Philippines that isn't just known for its hospitality or its music, but for its courageous participation, a church that is willing to take the hit.
So bringing this all back to us, most of us listening aren't in the Philippines. We might not even be planning to go overseas. But this concept of the ecosystem really stuck with me.
It's a universal challenge. I think this book is a mirror. It asks all of us, are you part of the irrigation system? Are you helping the resources flow to where they are needed? Or are you just a puddle?
A puddle. Ouch.
Well, puddles are comfortable. They just sit there and collect water. But they also stagnate. The book challenges you, the listener, to move from a receiving mindset, what can the church do for me, to a sending mindset. How can I use my assets, my job, my parenting to push the mission forward?
It really exposes how comfort can disguise itself as faithfulness. We can be so busy with church activities that we feel like we're accomplishing a lot.
But really, we're just maintaining our own little terrace. We're polishing the cage.
Exactly. And that's why the strategy matters. Formation, dealing with family barriers, redefining success. These aren't just for missionaries. These are for anyone who wants to live a life that actually counts for something.
It requires a fundamental shift in identity.
Yeah.
You stop seeing yourself as a consumer of faith, and you start seeing yourself as a producer and an exporter of it.
You know, we always like to leave you with something to chew on.
Yeah.
And the source material has a final closing question that, honestly, it just stops you in your tracks. I've been thinking about it all week.
It's the kind of question that strips away all the excuses.
So, as you go about your week, whether you're in a boardroom or a classroom or just driving home, I want you to ask yourself this one question.
Mm-hmm.
If God answered every prayer you currently pray about missions,
Okay.
would it change anything in the world?
Mm.
Or would it only affirm your own comfort?
That's the test.
That is the test. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
My pleasure as always.